For thousands of years, the galaxy believed one simple truth. Humans did not exist. In the massive archives of the Galactic Council, there was only a small section about them. It was hidden deep inside the oldest records, in a category called unverified legends. Many young scholars who studied the archives laughed when they saw it. Humans were described as a strange species from a distant blue planet called Earth. According to the ancient records, their world was extremely dangerous. It had violent storms, deep oceans, massive volcanoes, and gravity stronger than most planets in the galaxy. Most scientists agreed on one thing. No intelligent life could survive on a world like that. Because of this, the Council officially decided long ago that humans were not real. They were only stories created by early explorers who misunderstood what they saw. Over time, the legends slowly disappeared from history. New civilizations rose. New alliances formed. Wars were fought between powerful empires. But no one ever found Earth. And eventually, almost everyone forgot about humans. Except for a few historians who still studied the old records. One of them was a young researcher named Keeler, who worked inside the Galactic Council archive station. Keeler spent most of his days reading forgotten data files from thousands of years ago. Many of the stories were strange, but one story always caught his attention. The story of humanity. According to the records, humans were extremely adaptable. They survived in dangerous environments where most species would instantly die. Their bodies were strong, their minds were creative, and their determination was almost impossible to break. Some reports even claimed that humans had once explored early space long before most galactic civilizations discovered faster-than-light travel. But then the records suddenly ended. No explanation. No final message. Just silence. It was as if humanity had simply disappeared. Many historians believed the species destroyed itself long ago. But Keeler was not completely convinced. Something about the story felt unfinished. Late one evening, while studying ancient star maps, Keeler noticed something strange. A region of space that had never been fully explored. It was located far beyond the outer trade routes of the galaxy. Old explorer reports mentioned unusual energy readings from that region, but no one had ever investigated it closely. Curious, Keeler sent the information to a small exploration fleet from the Zereth Empire, one of the strongest powers in the galaxy. The Zereth commanders did not take the message very seriously. They believed the mission would only confirm that the area was empty. Still, sending a few ships to check was easy. So the fleet began its journey. Days later, the Zereth ships arrived near the unexplored sector. At first, everything looked normal. The stars were quiet. The scanners showed nothing unusual. The fleet commander, Captain Verex, was already preparing to leave when one of the sensor officers suddenly froze. "Captain, you need to see this." A massive energy reading had appeared on the scanners. At first, the crew believed it was a natural phenomenon, maybe a dying star or a strange cosmic storm. But the signal was moving. Slowly. Very slowly. Captain Verex ordered the ships to move closer. As the fleet approached, the sensor readings became stronger. Then the scanners began showing shapes. Huge shapes. Metal structures. Ships. But not normal ships. These vessels were enormous. Each one was larger than the biggest warships ever built by the Zereth Empire. And there were many of them. Dozens. Then hundreds. The fleet officers stared at the main screen in complete silence. A massive formation of gigantic ships slowly emerged from the darkness of space. Their designs were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their hulls were covered in heavy armor, massive weapon systems, and engines powerful enough to shake the surrounding space. It looked less like a fleet. And more like a moving wall of steel. Then the communication system suddenly activated. A signal was being transmitted from the unknown ships. The Zereth crew quickly decoded the message. A calm voice filled the command bridge. "This is the United Earth Defense Fleet." The officers looked at each other in confusion. "Earth?" The voice continued. "You have entered restricted human territory. Please identify yourselves." For several seconds, no one spoke. Captain Varex slowly turned toward the main display, where the massive ships were now clearly visible. Thousands of them. All moving together in perfect formation. And each ship carried the same symbol painted across its hull. A small blue planet. Earth. At that moment, the entire Zereth fleet realized something that would soon shake the entire galaxy. The ancient legends were not stories. Humans were real. And they had just revealed themselves to the stars. For several seconds after the message ended, the command bridge of the Zereth flagship remained completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The massive ships on the screen continued drifting slowly through space, their enormous engines glowing softly like distant stars. Compared to them, the Zereth fleet suddenly looked very small. Captain Varex finally broke the silence. "Open communication," he ordered. The signal officer hesitated for a moment before activating the transmitter. His hands moved carefully across the console. "This is Captain Varex of the Zereth Imperial Fleet," the captain said firmly. "We did not know this region was occupied. Please identify your civilization." For a moment, there was only static. Then the same calm voice returned. "We are humanity. This system is under the protection of the United Earth Defense Fleet." The voice sounded peaceful, but something about it made the entire crew uneasy. It was the confidence. The humans were not nervous. They were not aggressive. They simply sounded certain. Captain Varex studied the screen carefully. More details about the massive ships were appearing on the scanners. Each vessel was heavily armored. Large weapon systems were visible along their sides. Energy readings from their shields were stronger than anything the Zereth had ever recorded. One of the officers spoke quietly. "Captain, our scanners are counting over 3,000 warships." Another officer added nervously, "And more are appearing." Just as he finished speaking, space itself seemed to ripple. Suddenly, bright flashes of light appeared across the dark background of the stars. New ships were arriving. Massive human vessels exited hyperspace one after another, joining the already enormous fleet. Within minutes, the number of ships had doubled. Captain Varex felt a cold tension inside his chest. The Zereth Empire was powerful. Their navy controlled hundreds of star systems. But even their largest fleets rarely gathered more than 200 warships in one place. This human fleet was already 10 times that size. And it kept growing. The communication system activated again. "This is Admiral Nathan Carter of the United Earth Defense Fleet," the human voice said calmly. "Please state your purpose for entering human territory." Captain Varex remained calm, though his officers were clearly nervous. "We are explorers," he replied. "Our mission was only to investigate unusual energy signals." There was another short pause. Then Admiral Carter answered. "You have discovered the outer border of human space." The statement caused confusion among the Zereth officers. Human space. No one in the galaxy had ever recorded such a territory. Captain Varex slowly asked the question that everyone on the bridge was thinking. "If humans control this region, why has the galaxy never seen you before?" The human admiral answered without hesitation. "We preferred it that way." The simple sentence made the bridge grow quiet again. For thousands of years, the galaxy had believed humans were a myth. Yet now an entire military fleet stood before them. Hidden. Prepared. Waiting. Captain Varex tried to understand what this meant. "How long has your civilization been active in space?" he asked. Admiral Carter's answer came calmly. "Long enough." At that moment, the Zereth sensors detected something else. Even larger ships. gigantic structures slowly moving behind the war fleet. These vessels were enormous, far larger than the already massive battleships. They looked like entire cities floating in space. One officer whispered in shock. "Those ships, they're bigger than our space stations." The realization slowly spread across the bridge. Humanity had not just built a fleet. They had built an entire military force capable of controlling large parts of the galaxy. And they had done it without anyone noticing. Captain Varek spoke carefully. "If your species has been here for so long, why reveal yourselves now?" For the first time, the human admiral paused longer before answering. When he finally spoke, his voice remained calm, but now there was a hint of something deeper. "Because the galaxy has grown, complicated." Before the captain could ask what that meant, the scanners suddenly detected something unusual. Ships were moving. The human fleet was shifting formation. Thousands of vessels began turning slowly in perfect coordination. But they were not preparing for battle. They were opening a path. Behind them, space rippled once more. And then something even larger appeared. A new group of ships emerged from hyperspace. These vessels were unlike anything the Zereth had ever seen. They were enormous. True giants of space. Each ship looked like a floating fortress, covered with weapon platforms and shield emitters powerful enough to light up the darkness around them. One of the sensor officers spoke in disbelief. "Captain, those ships are bigger than anything in our records." Captain Varek slowly understood something terrifying. The ships they had first seen were only the outer patrol fleet. What was arriving now was something far greater. The real human armada. Thousands more warships began appearing from hyperspace, filling the stars in every direction. The Zereth fleet was now surrounded by a force so large it was almost impossible to count. Yet the human ships still did not fire. They simply waited. Then Admiral Carter spoke once more. "Captain Varex, you should inform your government." The Zereth captain looked at the endless human fleet on his screen. "What message should I send?" The human admiral answered calmly. "Tell them humanity is no longer a myth. And we are finally ready to meet the galaxy." The message from the human admiral reached the Zereth Empire only a few hours later. Within minutes, the highest leaders of the Empire gathered in their main command chamber. The large circular room was filled with tension as the recorded transmission from Captain Varex played on the central screen. The image of the massive human fleet appeared once again. Thousands of enormous warships. Silent. Organized. Powerful. The Zereth leaders watched without speaking. For many of them, the most shocking part was not the size of the fleet. It was the name the human admiral had used. Humanity. One of the oldest advisors slowly stood up. "I remember that name," he said quietly. Several younger commanders looked confused. "You mean the myth?" one of them asked. The old advisor nodded slowly. "Yes, the species that was supposed to come from a world called Earth." The chamber quickly filled with discussion. For centuries, the idea of humans had only been a strange story in the oldest historical files. Very few leaders had ever paid attention to it. But now those old records suddenly became very important. The Emperor immediately ordered the Galactic archives to open every file connected to humanity. Within minutes, ancient data began appearing on the large screens. Old explorer reports. Ancient star maps. Strange recordings from long-lost missions. At first, the information seemed incomplete. But when the historians began connecting the pieces together, a shocking picture slowly formed. Thousands of years ago, early explorers from different civilizations had reported strange signals coming from a distant region of space. Those signals always came from the same direction. A small yellow star system. A system that the ancient records called Sol. According to the oldest explorer reports, there was a dangerous planet in that system. A blue world covered in oceans. Earth. The reports described the planet as extremely hostile to life. Its gravity was stronger than most worlds, its weather was violent, and its environment constantly changed. Because of these conditions, most scientists believed that intelligent life could never develop there. But the explorers had discovered something unexpected. Primitive machines. Artificial satellites. Signs of early technology. Someone on that world had already reached space. But before the explorers could investigate further, their missions had mysteriously ended. Some ships vanished. Others turned back after reporting strange signals. And after that, no one ever went there again. One of the historians spoke slowly while studying the ancient records. It seems the explorers stopped visiting that region for a reason. What reason? The emperor asked. The historian looked up. They were warned. A quiet silence spread across the chamber. The historians found an old recording from one of the last explorer missions that had approached the Sol system. The message was short, but clear. Unknown vessels detected near Earth orbit. They are heavily armed. We advise all exploration ships to stay away from this system. The date on the recording shocked everyone. The message had been sent almost 2,000 years ago. One of the commanders spoke with disbelief. You're saying humans already had warships 2,000 years ago? The historian nodded slowly. Yes. The room grew quiet again. Another officer looked at the recent footage from Captain Varex. If they already had ships back then, he said carefully, what have they been building all this time? No one answered. Because the answer was becoming obvious. Humanity had not disappeared. They had simply chosen to remain hidden. While the rest of the galaxy fought wars and expanded their empires, the humans had stayed inside their own territory. Watching. Learning. Preparing. The Emperor slowly turned toward the giant image of the human fleet. The size of those warships suddenly made much more sense. This was not a new civilization. This was a civilization that had been quietly advancing for thousands of years. And now they were finally leaving their territory. At that same moment, a new message arrived from Captain Varex. The fleet was still surrounded by the human armada. But something unexpected had happened. The human ships were moving again. They were forming a massive traveling formation. Thousands of ships were turning toward the center of the galaxy. One officer spoke nervously. Your Majesty, it looks like the humans are leaving their territory. The Emperor stared at the screen. Where are they going? The officer checked the new data coming from the Zareth fleet. The answer appeared a few seconds later. His voice became quiet. They are heading toward the Galactic Council. A wave of shock moved through the chamber. The Galactic Council was the center of power for most civilizations in the known galaxy. If the human armada arrived there, every major species would see them. The Emperor leaned forward slowly. Send a warning to the Council immediately. What should the message say? The communication officer asked. The Emperor looked once more at the endless human fleet moving through space. Then he spoke the only warning that mattered. Tell them the legends were true. Humanity is real. And they are coming. Across the galaxy, long-range scanners suddenly began detecting the same strange signal. At first, scientists believed it was only a powerful energy wave traveling through space. But as the signal moved closer, the truth became impossible to ignore. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was a fleet. A massive fleet. Deep inside the Galactic Council's Central Command Station, dozens of analysts were staring at their screens in disbelief. New data kept appearing every second. Ships. Thousands of ships. All moving in the same direction. Toward the center of the galaxy. Toward them. The Council world, Arcanis, had always been the safest place in the galaxy. For thousands of years, powerful empires had protected it. The strongest fleets from different civilizations guarded the system day and night. No enemy had ever dared approach it. Until now. One of the sensor officers looked at the growing number of signals. "There are too many," she whispered. The chief analyst frowned. "Count them again." The officer checked the scanners once more. The result was even worse. Over 8,000 confirmed ships, and the number is still rising. A quiet wave of fear spread through the command center. Most galactic fleets never reached even a few hundred ships. Gathering thousands of warships required enormous resources. Yet this fleet was already larger than anything in recorded history. And it was still growing. Within hours, every government in the galaxy had received the same report. An unknown armada was approaching the Galactic Council. Soon the images arrived. The first long-distance photographs of the human fleet spread across communication networks everywhere. People across the galaxy saw the ships for the first time. They looked massive. Each warship was built like a floating fortress, covered with armor layers and heavy weapon systems. Their engines burned with a steady blue light that stretched across the darkness of space. Between the warships traveled even larger vessels. Gigantic carriers. Massive command ships. Moving cities of steel and technology. Wherever the fleet passed, stars disappeared behind the endless formation of ships. It was like watching a moving wall of metal slowly crossing the galaxy. Back on the council world, the leaders of dozens of civilizations gathered in the main council chamber. Large screens filled the room, showing live images from long-range probes. The human armada was getting closer every minute. One of the council leaders spoke nervously. "Do we know their intentions?" Another leader shook his head. "No attacks have been reported. No planets have been destroyed. They have simply been traveling." "But toward us," someone added. That was the problem. The armada was not spreading across the galaxy. It was moving directly toward the council. Toward the heart of galactic civilization. The council's military commanders quickly ordered every available defense fleet to move into position around the system. Hundreds of warships gathered near the council world. Defensive satellites activated. Planetary shields powered up. Everyone waited. Days passed. Then the sensors finally detected them. The human fleet had arrived at the edge of the Arcani system. A deep silence filled the command centers across the planet as the first human ships appeared on the scanners. At first, only a few signals appeared. Then hundreds. Then thousands. The dark sky above the system slowly filled with new stars. But they were not stars. They were engines. Blue light stretching across space as the massive human armada entered the system. The Council's defense fleets immediately formed a protective line around the planet. Weapon systems powered up. Targeting computers locked onto the incoming ships. But something strange happened. The human fleet stopped. Far from the planet. They remained at a safe distance, forming an enormous formation around the outer edge of the system. Thousands of warships waited silently. No weapons fired. No aggressive movement. They simply held position. Then every communication network across the system suddenly activated. A powerful transmission appeared on every screen. Ships. Stations. Military bases. Civilian networks. Everywhere. A calm human voice spoke clearly across the entire star system. "This is Admiral Nathan Carter of the United Earth Defense Fleet." The council leaders listened carefully. "We come in peace," the admiral continued. "But we will defend ourselves if necessary." The message spread instantly across the entire galaxy. For the first time in history, humanity was speaking openly to the stars. The human admiral paused for a moment before continuing. For thousands of years, humanity remained within its own territory. We watched. We learned. We prepared. Images of the enormous human fleet filled the screens. But now, Admiral Carter said calmly, the time has come for humanity to join the galaxy. Back inside the council chamber, the leaders looked at each other nervously. Outside their windows, the night sky had changed forever. Thousands of human warships now surrounded the system. Silent. Patient. Powerful. And for the first time in galactic history, the leaders of the galaxy realized something they had never imagined before. Humans were not a forgotten myth. They were a civilization strong enough to challenge the entire galaxy. And they had finally arrived. The sky above the council world had never looked like this before. For thousands of years, the stars above Arcanis had always been calm and peaceful. Trade ships traveled between systems, and defense fleets quietly protected the planet. But now the sky was filled with something completely different. Human warships. Thousands of them. Their blue engines glowed softly in the darkness, forming a giant ring around the entire star system. Every telescope, every sensor, and every satellite was focused on the same site. The human armada. Across the planet, billions of citizens watched the images through news broadcasts and public screens. Some were afraid. Others were simply amazed. No one had ever seen a fleet this large. Inside the council chamber, the leaders of many civilizations sat in silence. The massive windows behind them showed the endless formation of ships floating in space. The tension inside the room was heavy. Finally, the main council leader spoke. "They claim they come in peace," he said slowly. "But no peaceful civilization arrives with an army like that." Another leader nodded. "Perhaps they want to intimidate us." Before anyone could respond, a message arrived from the human fleet. A small shuttle was approaching the planet. Just one ship. The Council's defense fleets immediately locked their weapons on the incoming vessel. Fighter ships surrounded it from every direction as it slowly entered the atmosphere. But the shuttle made no hostile moves. It simply followed the path given by the defense forces and landed at the Council spaceport. Within minutes, security teams surrounded the landing area. Council guards waited carefully as the door of the shuttle slowly opened. A single figure stepped out. A human. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a human was standing on the council world. The guards studied him carefully. He looked calm. Not afraid. Not aggressive. Just confident. The human wore a simple dark uniform with a small symbol on his chest. A blue planet. Earth. Soon the human diplomat was escorted into the council chamber. The leaders of dozens of civilizations watched him closely as he walked to the center of the room. Some had expected a giant warrior species. Others imagined something terrifying. But the human looked normal. Just a person. He looked around the chamber for a moment before speaking. "My name is Ambassador Daniel Hayes," he said calmly. "I represent the United Nations of Earth." His voice was steady and clear. "We thank the Council for allowing us to speak." The leaders exchanged uncertain glances. Finally, one of them asked the question everyone was thinking. "If humanity has existed for so long," the Council leader said carefully, "why has the galaxy never seen you before?" Ambassador Hayes smiled slightly. "That was our decision." The room grew quiet as he continued. "Thousands of years ago, when humanity first discovered faster-than-light travel, we explored nearby star systems. Very quickly we learned something important." He paused. The galaxy was already full of powerful civilizations. Several leaders nodded. "Yes," the ambassador said. "And many of them were constantly fighting each other." The council members shifted uncomfortably. "So humanity made a choice," Hayes explained. "Instead of rushing into the galaxy, we decided to stay hidden." He pointed toward the sky outside the chamber window. "We used that time to grow stronger." The council leaders slowly looked up at the massive human fleet visible in orbit. Ambassador Hayes continued. "For centuries, we built our technology. We expanded through our own territory. We studied the history of every major civilization. One of the council members asked nervously, and now? Now, Hayes said calmly, we are ready to join the galaxy. Another leader frowned. With that fleet? The human diplomat looked out the window again. Our fleet exists for one reason, he said. To make sure humanity is never threatened. The simple answer filled the chamber with silence. Outside, thousands of human warships floated quietly in space. None of their weapons were aimed at the planet. They were simply waiting. The council leader finally spoke again. So what does humanity want? Ambassador Hayes turned back toward the council. Peace. The word echoed softly across the room. We wish to trade. To explore. To share knowledge. He paused one last time. But we will also defend ourselves if necessary. The council leaders looked once more at the massive fleet surrounding their system. At that moment, they finally understood the truth. Humanity had not entered the galaxy as a weak new civilization asking for protection. They had arrived as equals. Possibly even something more. The ambassador gave a small respectful nod. Humanity looks forward to our future together. Outside the chamber windows, the endless human armada continued to shine across the stars. And on that day, the entire galaxy realized something important. Humans were never a myth. They were simply waiting for the right moment to reveal their power.